Imagine like trying to cool a massive, $1 trillion artificial intelligence data center in the absolute zero vacuum of space.
Right.
Or picture a sprawling warehouse just filled with thousands of hollow, fake computer servers that were painstakingly built for the sole purpose of tricking U.S. federal auditors.
It's completely wild.
It really is. Today, we are looking at what happens when human ambition just completely outgrows the systems designed to contain it. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this right now, yes, you, the curious learner who always wants to look past the headlines and figure out the actual mechanics of how our world operates, we have a stack of sources today that covers, well, pretty much everything.
Yeah, quite a range.
Right, from a devastating aviation tragedy and billion-dollar technological hubris to geopolitical energy shocks and medical breakthroughs.
And, when you lay all these seemingly disparate sources out on the table, a very stark, unifying theme really emerges here. We are analyzing systems under stress. We're looking at what happens when the hidden architecture of our world is pushed way past its breaking point. Whether that's a catastrophic breakdown in runway safety protocols or the highly calculated evasion of international export laws.
Yeah.
Or even just the sheer chaotic energy demands of the next decade. Today is an exploration of how humanity navigates, mitigates, and occasionally, exacerbates systemic risk.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to begin with the most visceral, immediate example of a system failing under stress, and it happened on the tarmac at LaGuardia Airport in New York.
Yeah. It is a profound tragedy, really, that perfectly illustrates how modern disasters operate.
The details from the sources are just harrowing. So, March 22, 2026. It's just before midnight. Air Canada Express Flight 8646, which is a CRJ-900 operated by Jazz Aviation, is landing on runway 4.
Right, coming in from Montreal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With 72 passengers and 4 crew members, the aircraft is traveling at roughly 100 miles per hour down the runway. And at that precise moment, a Port Authority fire truck is crossing that exact same runway.
It's just a nightmare scenario.
Complete nightmare. The collision is catastrophic. The nose of the plane is completely crushed. Both pilots, including First Officer Antoine Forrest, are tragically killed on impact, and over 40 people end up hospitalized.
And amidst the sheer devastation of that 100-mile-per-hour impact, the physics of the survival stories are, well, they're difficult to even comprehend.
Yeah, that's the part that really stops you in your tracks. There was a flight attendant, Solange Tremblay, who was completely ejected from the severed aircraft.
Ejected out of the plane.
Yes. First responders found her 100 meters away, still strapped into her seat, and she miraculously survived.
Unbelievable.
And another passenger, Clement Liliev, publicly credited the pilot's incredibly hard, evasive braking at the very last second. He said that absorbed enough kinetic energy to save the lives of the people in the main cabin.
Wow.
But we have to look at the mechanics of the failure here. Why on earth is a fire truck crossing an active runway in the dark?
Right, and what's fascinating here is how modern disasters are rarely single points of failure.
Oh, absolutely.
The fire truck had absolutely nothing to do with the Air Canada flight. It was actually responding to a completely separate, relatively minor incident.
Right, the United flight.
Yeah, a United Airlines flight that had just aborted its takeoff because of an unidentified cabin odor.
So a localized odor on a totally different plane triggers this massive cascading systemic collapse.
Exactly.
The air traffic control audio from that night is chilling. You can literally hear a frantic controller shouting, "Stop! Truck 1, stop, stop, stop!"
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Reading through the timeline, I picture the airport like this highly optimized factory conveyor belt. It's running perfectly, but it has zero slack. Someone accidentally drops a wrench onto the belt, which is the United cabin odor. And because there is no buffer to absorb that anomaly, the entire system rips itself apart.
That conveyor belt analogy is incredibly precise.
Yeah.
An anomaly forces a sudden deviation from standard protocol. Resources are abruptly diverted. And in that split second of deviation, the situational awareness of the entire grid just fractures. And Port Authority Executive Director Catherine Garcia noted the haunting context here. This was the first fatal crash at LaGuardia in exactly 34 years to the day, mirroring the 1992 U.S. air crash.
34 years exactly. And naturally, when a system fails this spectacularly, the immediate public assumption is, well, lack of resources, right?
Like curse. That's always the go-to.
Rumors started swirling that the control tower was severely understaffed. But the FAA administrator stepped in and confirmed they actually had 33 of their 37 targeted air traffic controllers on duty.
Right, so they weren't drastically shorthanded.
Exactly. The system didn't fail because it lacked bodies. It failed because the complexity of the variables momentarily outpaced human oversight.
Which is a terrifying reality to confront.
Yeah.
But, while that runway collision is a tragic, unintentional failure of a safety system, our next source examines what happens when a regulatory system is intentionally dismantled from the inside out.
Oh, yeah. This pivot is crazy.
We are shifting from physical safety to the trillion-dollar tech supply chain.
Yeah. So the U.S. Department of Justice just unsealed an indictment against executives at Supermicro. Specifically, Yishan Wally Liu, a co-founder and senior VP, along with a Taiwan general manager named Stephen Chang, and a third-party broker, Willie Sun.
Major players.
The charge: diverting $2.5 billion worth of high-end NVIDIA GPUs to China, blatantly bypassing U.S. export controls.
And to understand the mechanism of this stress, we have to look at the hardware. These specific NVIDIA GPUs are the foundational building blocks of the global artificial intelligence arms race.
Right.
The U.S. government placed strict export controls on them to prevent geopolitical adversaries from scaling their AI capabilities. They effectively choked the supply chain.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you think of a $2.5 billion tech smuggling ring, you naturally assume it involves, like, hyper-sophisticated cyber espionage or encrypted digital routing.
Right, some hacker stuff.
Yeah, but the DOJ details reveal a surprisingly brute force, low-tech operation. They used a Southeast Asian middleman. They repackaged the servers into generic, unmarked cardboard boxes.
Cardboard boxes.
Unbelievable. And the wildest detail: they physically built thousands of non-working, empty dummy servers to sit in a warehouse just to fool federal auditors.
Like servers.
I have to ask, how does a massive, publicly traded tech giant think they can build a literal warehouse of fake, hollow metal boxes and not get caught? I mean, it sounds like the plot of a bad heist movie.
It really does. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, that desperation is exactly the point. The absurdity of the method reveals the immense pressure of the market. The global race for AI supremacy is so fiercely competitive and the hardware is so tightly restricted that companies are basically regressing to analog smuggling tactics.
They're just doing whatever it takes.
Yeah, they can't hack their way around a physical export ban, so they resort to building Hollywood-style movie props to trick the physical inventory auditors. It proves that when you apply maximum regulatory stress to a trillion-dollar demand curve, the system doesn't necessarily stop. It just mutates into the black market.
It's the ultimate paradox. They are hiding the most advanced technology in human history inside plain cardboard boxes. And, speaking of AI supremacy, while some executives are allegedly faking their supply chains in warehouses, others are trying to bypass the terrestrial supply chain entirely.
Oh, you're talking about the Terafab announcement.
Yes. Elon Musk just took the stage at an old power plant in Austin, Texas, to announce a $25 billion joint venture between Tesla, SpaceX, and xAI. The stated goal is to produce 1 terawatt of computing power annually.
Which is massive.
Massive. They are targeting 2-nanometer process technology, and they want to reach 1 million wafer starts per month.
And just to put the sheer scale of that metric into perspective, 1 million wafer starts a month would be roughly 70% of the entire global output of TSMC.
Wow.
And TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company, is the undisputed titan of the chip industry.
So Tesla wants to replicate 70% of the global chip supply in a single facility. But the twist in the sources is what totally breaks my brain.
Oh, the space angle.
80% of this computing power isn't meant for data centers on Earth. Musk intends to build orbital AI satellites.
Right.
He claims that space offers better solar irradiance to power the chips, and that the vacuum of space provides better cooling for the servers.
The engineering hubris required to make that claim is staggering, particularly regarding the thermodynamics.
Oh, do explain, because that sounded weird to me.
Well, a vacuum is a perfect insulator. Think of a thermos keeping your coffee hot. It works because there is a vacuum gap preventing heat transfer.
Oh, right.
On Earth, we use convection-like air or liquid moving across a server to carry the massive heat away. In the vacuum of space, there is no air for convection.
So how does it cool down?
You can only dissipate heat through radiation, which is incredibly inefficient for the massive thermal load of a 2-nanometer AI processor.
Honestly, this is like me saying I'm going to build a 100-story skyscraper tomorrow because I successfully put together a Lego set once.
Pretty much.
Tesla has zero experience in semiconductor manufacturing, and the sources we're looking at are brutally skeptical of the underlying motives here.
Definitely.
Tesla's auto business is currently seeing a decline in sales. SpaceX, conversely, is gearing up for a massive IPO. The analysts suggest this entire terafab narrative is a strategic attempt to tether Tesla's struggling auto valuation to the red-hot AI market, using SpaceX's orbital momentum as the vehicle.
It's a strategic maneuver we've seen from this leadership before, particularly when you look at the track record of scaling physical manufacturing.
Right. The sources bring up Battery Day in 2020. Tesla promised a revolution with their 4,680 battery cells, claiming they would hit 3 terawatt-hours of production by 2030. Currently, industry estimates put them at only about 2% of that original goal.
2%.
Yeah. TSMC spent $165 billion in multiple decades perfecting the microscopic, vibration-free clean rooms required to build 2-nanometer chips. Musk is claiming he will master that overnight and then launch the output into orbit, while his current terrestrial AI chips, the AI-5 and AI-6, are already facing delays.
It is the ultimate proposed complex system, and it seems fundamentally designed to buckle under its own weight. I mean, you are combining the microscopic fragility of 2-nanometer lithography, where literally a single speck of dust or a microvibration ruins a batch, with the extreme violence of orbital rocket launches.
And the vacuum heating problem.
Exactly, the thermodynamic nightmare of vacuum computing.
And the connective tissue between building data centers in space, smuggling GPUs on cargo ships, and running a chip fab in Texas is power, the immense, undeniable energy requirement. Which brings us to the next major systemic stress point in our sources. The global energy market is currently suffering from severe geopolitical whiplash.
Yeah, the International Energy Agency is sounding the alarm on a potential energy shock that could surpass the supply crises of the 1970s.
The metrics are incredibly volatile. The ongoing Iran war has damaged over 40 distinct energy assets across 9 countries. This has effectively severed roughly 20% of the global liquefied natural gas, or LNG, supply.
20% is a huge hit.
Huge. As a result, commodity markets are experiencing violent swings. West Texas intermediate crude oil prices plummeted 8 to 9%, dropping down to around $90 a barrel simply because the U.S. announced a temporary 5-day pause on military strikes.
It's just on a pause.
Yeah, and almost immediately after, prices rocketed back up as Iran launched fresh retaliatory attacks. The global energy grid is reacting instantaneously to localized violence.
And in response to that international volatility, we are seeing domestic energy policies execute maneuvers that are, frankly, legally and economically unprecedented.
Yes, and this requires us to look very closely at the mechanics of federal contracts. The Trump administration just finalized a massive deal. They're reimbursing the energy conglomerate Total Energy's $928 million.
Nearly $1 billion.
But they aren't paying them to build something. They're paying them nearly $1 billion to explicitly abandon 2 major U.S. offshore wind leases, specifically the Carolina Long Bay and New York Bight projects.
Right, so Total Energies is accepting that massive buyout, exiting the U.S. offshore wind market entirely, and redirecting that capital directly into fossil fuel infrastructure.
Right.
Specifically, they are funneling it into the Rio Grande LNG export facility in Texas.
So what does this all mean? Now, I want to be incredibly clear to you listening right now. We are looking strictly at the legal and economic mechanics detailed in our sources, and we are absolutely not taking any political sides on this policy pivot.
Just looking at the facts.
Exactly.
Right.
But regardless of your political affiliation or where you stand on this, the sheer mechanics of this maneuver are wild to consider. Federal courts had previously cleared these offshore wind farms to proceed, overruling initial national security concerns. But the executive branch stepped in and essentially used a billion-dollar financial incentive to legally reverse a court-approved infrastructure project, paying a private company to walk away from renewables and pivot toward oil and gas.
And this raises an important question about the structural integrity of long-term planning. I mean, how can global energy markets or domestic power grids ever achieve stability when the rules of the game can change overnight?
That's the million-dollar or billion-dollar question.
An offshore wind farm or an LNG export terminal requires billions of dollars and decades of lead time to construct. If the foundational contracts for our energy grid can be instantaneously bought out or reversed by a shift in political administration, or if global supply can be wiped out by a drone strike thousands of miles away, the entire system remains in a state of chronic vulnerability.
And when the international supply chains are faked and the energy markets are in chaos, human nature dictates a very specific response.
We pull back.
We try to lock down certainty at home. The final theme across our sources today shows a desperate push to mitigate risk domestically in our physical manufacturing, our financial markets, and even down to our own biology.
It is the systemic equivalent of securing the perimeter. When the outside world becomes too volatile, you shorten the leash.
Look at physical manufacturing. Toyota just announced a $1 billion capital injection to secure their U.S. supply chain. They are putting $800 million into their Georgetown, Kentucky facility to build out electric vehicle and battery capacity alongside the Camry and RAV4.
A massive localized investment.
And they are dropping another $200 million into their Indiana plant for the Grand Highlander. They don't want their components sitting on a cargo ship subject to international tariffs or geopolitical strikes. They want the metal stamped right in their own backyard.
They're paying a premium to engineer resilience against the exact global shocks we just outlined.
Exactly, and we are seeing that exact same impulse in the financial sector. There's a new bipartisan bill introduced by Senator John Curtis of Utah and Senator Adam Schiff of California titled the Prediction Markets Are Gambling Act. The legislation aims to strip the Commodity Futures Trading Commission of its power to regulate entities like Kalshi, which is a platform that allows users to bet on real-world outcomes. The bill would ban these federally registered entities from offering sports prediction contracts and throw all gambling regulation back to individual states.
The legislative push is a direct reaction to the sheer volume of financial risk everyday citizens are suddenly exposed to. The sources note that these prediction platforms process $1 billion in trading volume on the Super Bowl alone.
$1 billion on one game. You might be listening to this and wondering, what do a Toyota plant in Kentucky, a congressional bill about sports betting, and tick bites have in common?
Right.
It is all about building firewalls. Which brings me to the tick bites. Pfizer and Valneva have developed an investigational Lyme disease vaccine known as PF073-07405.
Quite a catchy name.
Oh yeah, rolls right off the tongue. Phase 3 trials just demonstrated over 70% efficacy, and it's heading to the FDA. But the mechanism of how it works is fascinating. It's a 6-valent OSPI-based vaccine.
And the biological mechanics of an OSPI vaccine are entirely different from how we traditionally think of immunity.
How so?
Normally, a vaccine trains your body to fight a pathogen once it enters your bloodstream.
Right, but this vaccine actually works inside the tick. The OSPA protein is found on the surface of the Lyme bacteria while it is still living inside the tick's gut.
Yeah, this is the crazy part.
When the tick bites you and begins to feed, it ingests your blood, which now contains the vaccine-induced antibodies. Those antibodies enter the tick and neutralize the bacteria inside the insect's stomach, effectively killing the threat before it can even be transmitted into your body.
Wow.
It is quite literally a preemptive biological firewall. But let me push back on the broader idea of these firewalls, particularly the gambling legislation. Are we just playing an endless game of whack-a-mole?
What do you mean?
Well, can a federal bill actually stop a generation of users who are natively conditioned to bet on their smartphones from finding a way to gamble? If you shut down a regulated prediction market, won't they just migrate to an unregulated offshore crypto app?
Your skepticism about the efficacy of the law is completely valid, but the intent behind the legislation is what matters to our broader theme.
Okay.
Human society is engaged in a constant, desperate attempt to engineer safety nets when the environment feels hopelessly unpredictable.
Right.
Whether it's the biological firewall of an OSPI vaccine neutralizing a threat inside a parasite, a multinational automaker spending $1 billion to localize its supply chain, or Congress trying to shield citizens from acute financial ruin on their phones, we are continually trying to build resilience into systems that constantly threaten to overwhelm us.
We've covered some immense, complicated ground today. We started by examining the tragic, cascading breakdown of communication on a dark runway at LaGuardia. We looked at the extreme lengths companies will go to evade regulatory systems, hiding billion-dollar AI chips behind faked cardboard servers.
Literally empty boxes.
Yeah. We analyzed the incredible thermodynamic and engineering hubris of trying to build massive space-bound chip fabs to bypass Earth's supply chains entirely. We navigated the economic whiplash of global energy markets and billion-dollar government lease buyouts. And finally, we explored the ways we try to lock down certainty at home through localized manufacturing, legislative firewalls, and cutting-edge biological defense.
It leaves us with a critical, perhaps unsettling thought to ponder as we look toward the next decade.
What's that?
Well, as our world becomes increasingly reliant on these massive, hyper-interconnected architectures, whether it's Elon Musk's vision of orbital AI data centers communicating with terrestrial grids, or a global energy market that wildly fluctuates based on a single drone strike thousands of miles away, or are these systems fundamentally becoming too complex for human oversight? When the next inevitable anomaly occurs, when that unexpected variable suddenly crosses the runway, will it be our automated algorithms that manage to catch the error? Or, much like the incredibly quick reflexes of the pilots who slammed on the brakes of that Air Canada flight, will it ultimately be human intuition that we have to rely on when the system fractures?
That is the ultimate question of the modern age. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today and for exploring these sources with such rigorous curiosity. Keep questioning the mechanics of the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.